I'm not Bahai, the religion. I am a spiritual seeker, though. And I find truth in a lot of different books and texts and different paths. When I came across a book from the Bahai faith called the Book of Certitude, I was flipping through it and I found something that has stuck with me. And I want to read it and sort of analyze it because I think it's beautiful. But once again, I'm not Bahai. I do not represent the religion. But this, I think, is something that most spiritual people and seekers, I think, can relate to. The quote goes like this: "Those who follow the snow-white path and treadeth the footsteps of the crimson pillar shall in no way reach their abode unless first their hands are empty of those worldly things cherished by men." It's very poetic, and I love the imagery. The snow-white path, the crimson pillar, the hands. I mean, what a beautiful prose. And you don't have to know what the crimson pillar means to the Baha'i. I happen to know. I've looked it up. I don't necessarily feel that way about this quote because I don't think it's about the martyrs. I think because that's how they interpret the crimson pillar. It's people who've died for God. I don't really think it's that. I think that the crimson pillar is more like the guidance, your guide, the one who is illuminating the path. And we can get, and I think the crimson aspect is the sacrificial component to that guide. But this is a spiritual guide. I'm not talking about a physical person. This is my interpretation. And I think the snow-white path is the path towards spiritual truth, right? So one who is on the snow-white path, the path to spiritual truth, who treads the footsteps of the guide, this is how I'm interpreting it, will in no way reach their abode. Well, what is the abode? I think the abode of the spiritual path is the place where rust and moths do not corrupt. It is that place of perfection outside of the physical universe, the spiritual existence of perfection. Some might call it union with God. Others might call it heaven. But whatever tradition you're part of, you might understand that this is, it's that goal of existence in perfection. And you cannot reach that goal if your hands are not empty of the worldly possessions cherished by men. This is very similar to what Jesus stated in his ministry about it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven. It isn't that rich people are inherently evil, but when you're wealthy, you tend to be tied and yoked to maintaining that wealth. And you're more sensitive to your wealth, and you're less open to giving it out. And this is a generalization, and it is a bit of a stereotype, but I've seen it. We've all seen it, right? The person in your family who has the most wealth gives the least, right? And the people who are the poorest give the most. People I know who are very poor in my family, they have been very giving with me. And the people who have the most wealth don't give anything, right? Because they're consumed by it is greed, and they may not know it as such, but what that problem is that it attaches them to the world, and the kingdom of this world, which is not of God, becomes sort of their focus, right? I used to tell people this, and a lot of people don't agree with me, a lot of spiritual people, but I believe that as a spiritual person, you can either cast your vision up or to God, or cast your vision down to the earth. But when you do one or the other, it affects the other. So when you live for the higher, then your worldly experience is diminished. And when you live for the world, your spiritual experience is diminished. You can't really have both, in my view. I know people disagree with that, and a lot of spiritual circles will tell me that, well, you can have your head in the spiritual realms and your feet rooted on earth. I don't really believe that, because that once you start thinking about the worldly concerns of money, finances, in that moment, in that space of your mental space, God is not existing. The spiritual path is not really present. When the spiritual path is present, you really don't care about those things so much. You detach from them. So it's sort of it's a choice, an either or. And I think that meshes really nicely with this quote. It's a very beautiful quote. Those who follow the snow white path and treadeth in the crimson footsteps of the crimson pillars shall in no way reach their abode unless first their hands are empty of those worldly things cherished by men. The more we cherish something, and this also links to Buddhism. I'm getting there when I thought of the word cherish. The more that we cherish the worldly things is the more we yoke to an illusion, the illusionary nature. And the thing that is true and real is beyond that illusion. Maya, from the Hindu perspective, is the physical world, but it's also an illusion because it's not true reality. That true reality is beyond physicality. And in order to reach that abode, that state that we're all seeking as spiritual people, we have to let go of those worldly things that are cherished by the people around us. Fame, money, I know a lot of people that get upset when they think taxes are going up. And I've been there too. When I think my costs are going up, when the electric company comes in with an exorbitant price or insurance companies raise their rates, I'm there. I'm human. I make that error too. But it is an error. Because in that moment when I'm worried about my life, the money, taxes, I'm not thinking about God because I'm worried. When you're really attuned to God through prayer, meditation, and the spiritual practices of your path, likely you're not worried about anything because you're doing the work of God. We're all here for a short time. And in that time, we have opportunity. And that opportunity isn't to build wealth. For what reason? To die with millions of dollars? I think our opportunity is to live a life that is transformative enough that our real life begins on a good footing. And that real life is what occurs after our physical passing. So I hope those words, regardless if you're Bahai or not, or even if you don't like their religion, maybe those words can mean something to you as they mean something to me.